Hi, Samra. Your
Hello.
story is so resonating with us, both for myself as a psychologist and clinical director of mental health here at Medcan, but also in terms of all of the uh, impact you've had on the world in terms of your life story.
Well, thank you, Jack. And I'm so honored to be here. And these conversations are so important. And there's still, unfortunately, a lot of stigma and shame around having conversations about personal trauma, about mental health. And so, really excited to be here. And if I were to describe it in a nutshell or like kind of recap it very quickly, I was forced into marriage at the age of 16 in Pakistan and married to a man who was much older than me, who lived in this faraway country called Canada. And then I was shipped off here as his teen bride. I became a teen mom. I had very little non existent knowledge about birth control or my rights as a woman, as a young girl. So I became a very young mother, and then I was oppressed and abused for many years, kept from going to school or having any kind of freedom, autonomy, agency. And it took me over a decade to fight my way out of it and overcome all the barriers and hurdles that were in front of me, and then pursue my education as a single mom, working multiple jobs to make ends meet, and eventually graduating from the University of Toronto. And the academic success that I got when I graduated is what really motivated me to start breaking my silence, because I knew that my story wasn't just my story. It is sadly the story of millions of people around the world, countless people who are struggling and suffering in silence, trapped in cycles of oppression, and feeling like they have to hide bits and pieces of themselves to be accepted. And to fit into these boxes. And I wanted to do my part to break that silence and make a difference. And that work has led me here today.
Okay, that's terrific, and maybe it would help our listeners to learn a little bit about your own background. You say you grew up in Pakistan. You're the eldest, a number of kids, and in reading about you, you were a very bright, determined young lady. At the age of 7, you decided that you wanted to be a doctor, and now you're going to do that. But tell me a little bit about what happened to you in terms of your education and some of the challenges that appeared to lead you to being put into a forced marriage.
I grew up in a very patriarchal kind of a family, and it was a very much, even though I'm from Pakistan originally, but I grew up in Abu Dhabi, but the same kind of culture and surroundings and the same kind of social norms that were surrounding me were all about, girls are supposed to get married. The purpose of a girl is to fulfill the gender role that's prescribed for her. It was very confusing growing up because on one hand, my parents would celebrate when I would get straight A's on a test. But then on the other hand, it was also like, it's okay to dream, but just don't expect those dreams to come true. Like, stay within your limits. Don't forget that you're a girl. So I always didn't really quite know where those boundaries were, where those lines were. And I felt like a misfit because all my cousins and my friends and the girls around me were always dreaming about their wedding day and what color wedding gown they would wear. And I would be dreaming about going to Harvard or Stanford and, becoming a doctor or and changing the world. So I didn't quite feel like I fit in. I was always sort of termed as a bit of a black sheep, or someone that is a girl that's just kind of not normal. And and when I was 16, and even before that, I was so passionate about my education. So I was always like pushing the envelope, even though I was surrounded by these kinds of messages. So when I wasn't allowed to play cricket with the boys anymore, I started a girls' cricket team in my school, and then I started a school newspaper to share all my radical ideas about equality and justice. So I was a bit of an envelope pusher that way, and so I didn't really quite expect that something like this would happen to me. And then at the age of 16, as I was doing my math homework, my mom came into my room and stroked my hair lovingly, put a glass of orange juice in front of me, and announced that there's a marriage proposal. And in a few months, I was married off to this man who was 11 years older. I had never met him before. And he was now my new husband, and in many ways, my new owner. I felt like I was just a piece of property that was being handed off from my parents to this man. And I didn't really have any kind of agency or voice of my own.
And was that the norm? Because it sounds like you were a very determined young lady. You were basically someone who, as you said, you felt a bit of a misfit. You were academically oriented, you were intellectual, you were driven. Did you have any role models in terms of your academic drive and ambition?
There were some teachers, and because I grew up in Abu Dhabi and I went to a British school, so some of my teachers were very supportive of my education, and they would talk to me about, hey, have you heard of this university? This is a program that would be great for you. You're so bright. I was always top of my class, and even my parents, to some extent, my dad, for example, would celebrate when I would score the top grade, and my mom would like, yes, that's great. And my mom was a teacher. She was an educated woman, so I didn't really quite, even though there were messages of marriage all around, I thought it was kind of something in the faraway distance. It's going to happen when I'm done with my school and I've established myself in my career. And then, my parents would find someone for me. Arranged marriages were very common. There was hardly anyone who would actually marry out of love and choice. So everything was arranged. I was kind of expecting that. I just wasn't expecting that would happen when I was a kid and I was in high school. So that to me was extremely like, I'm so young. Why?
And yet you didn't rebel. I mean, on the one hand, you've got this confusion where your parents are proud of you. They're sending you to get a Western style education. You're excelling in that. You've got your dreams. And then on the other hand, you're in a culture that is basically saying a woman's place is in the home. She's chattel. She can be sold off. She can be done whatever. And you didn't rebel. That's the part that I found really interesting.
When it comes to rebellion, Jack, rebellion and force, it's not about force is not about a gun to your head or a knife to your throat. Force is about coercion, pressure. It's about a structure that's created. It's about conditioning. So if a child who has been raised in a cultural norm and a sort of a patriarchal community of thinking that, okay, this is my ultimate destiny, this is my ultimate place, and that child is put into that situation. And there were times when I definitely did resist. I would tell my mom, I don't want to do this. I would have nightmares. And there were times when I would resist, but then everybody around me would say, no, if you're going to be ungrateful, if you say no, you are going to be a disappointment to your family. My friends would say, oh, you are so lucky that you achieved this accomplishment of getting married. You're the first girl among all your cousins and all your friends to get married. That's such a big accomplishment. So everybody around me, and I'm a child, is saying this to me. I lost my voice, and eventually I'm like, I don't want to be seen as ungrateful. I don't want to be seen as the bad kid. I don't want to be seen as abnormal. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we all want to be liked, and we all want to win the approval of our parents, especially when we're children. And that's what happens in child marriages. Child marriage is not a child being taken kicking and screaming against their will and locked into a room and chained to the bed and then pronounced as husband and wife. It's really this coercion, this pressure that's created, which basically takes a child's voice away. And it's right. It's at that point, it's a choice of, okay, I'll say no. If I say no, I'm going to lose all my family and I'm going to be a disappointment in their eyes. So what's a child going to do at that point? It's a matter of survival.
And in your case, it was almost double jeopardy because not only did you not have a choice, the person to whom you were betrothed was physically and psychologically abusive to you. So not only were you married against your choice, you now had to come to Canada and live in an oppressive relationship. So take us through that period, because as a young girl, you were thinking, all right, I'll go along with this. It's a cultural norm. This is what people are doing. And then you arrive here. So tell us what happened.
When I arrived here, and the way the marriage was sort of sold to me was that this is your way to go to school. My parents would say that, we can't really send you away to university on your own because you're a girl. No girl from our family for entire generations had ever gone abroad to study. So this way you can go and study in Canada and we won't be worried about you because you'll be with your husband and he'll be your guardian. So when I came here, in my naive 16-year-old head, I had sort of convinced myself that, yeah, maybe this is just my ticket to getting an education. I wasn't even thinking about it from a marriage sense, although there was an impending doom inside of me that this man who I don't know is my husband and I have to obey him and dance to his tunes. So when I came here, I came with the sense of feeling lost and alone, but also this little bit of hope and optimism that I will hopefully be able to go to school. And then when I became pregnant right away, and then I was told that you need to stay at home because that's your place. And his mother, my ex-husband's mother, said to me that you should be grateful that we got you to the real purpose of being a woman sooner rather than later. And you didn't have to go through all of that useless education crap. And over the next few years, it was really like living in a dark world. I often describe it as, being in a place where there's enough air that I could just breathe and barely survive, but not enough to be able to breathe freely and thrive. It was like living in a state of constant suffocation and constant fear and walking on eggshells that I hope I don't do something wrong today to upset them. My ex-husband and his parents, we all lived in the same house. So I was supposed to be obedient and subservient and serving not just him, but also his parents. And it was I would just wish every day would be a dull day because that would be a good day. That would be a safe day.
And you had nowhere to turn and you were alone and no one would know what was going on. And then one day you walked into a daycare with your first daughter, is that correct? And something happened. Tell me what happened.
The only place I was allowed to go during those days, because I wasn't even allowed to go to my backyard, but the one place I got very reluctantly some permission to go was to take my daughter to an Ontario Early Years Center down the street. And it used to be about a 10-minute walk. And sometimes I would actually, there was like a little bridge along that walk, and I would sometimes hide under the bridge and take off the hijab that I was forced to wear, and just to feel the breeze in my hair and feel that little few seconds of freedom. And I would just feel like, just imagine that I'm not in the place I am today, and I'm not in this life, and I'm in some other life. So that was like my 5 seconds of freedom when I used to go to the Ontario Early Years Center. And when I went there and I started going there, the woman who ran the place, she was also originally from Pakistan, and she kind of sensed something was off. I would get very agitated and scared whenever the class was running a little bit over time, and she could sense that I would be very jumpy and scared, and I wouldn't really talk to a lot of people. So she, in many ways, I think she recognized the signs of abuse before I even knew what to call it. Because in my head, and I was told by everyone, this is just normal. And she one day, gave me her phone, her cordless phone. And she said, go into my office and make some calls. And she gave me a list of numbers to call. And that was the first time I even thought about talking to anyone or reaching out for any kind of help. Because I never had any freedom, not even any money. Like one time I was coming back from the Ontario Early Years Center, and my daughter wanted to get a donut, and I went into a Tim Hortons, and I thought I had a toonie, which I'd slipped into my coat pocket because I never had any money on me. But I would still find, loonies and toonies lying around at the house, and I would squirrel some away and put them into my purse or my pocket. And I was absolutely sure that I put a toonie in my pocket the night before. So I felt very proudly, went into the Tims, and I'm going to buy my daughter a donut. And then I put my hand in my pocket, wasn't there. And my daughter had already bit into her sprinkles donut, so I couldn't even return it. And my hands got clammy. My face was red. I was so humiliated and embarrassed. I'm like, what am I going to do? And a very kind person behind me ended up paying for her donut. And I remember walking out of the Tims and sitting at a bench and just breaking down and sobbing and in tears and thinking to myself, like, how am I going to make anything of my life when I'm so pathetic and powerless that I can't even buy a $2 donut for my daughter? So those were some of the turning points early on in my life that made me feel that I need to do something about this. I'm in a very hopeless situation, but maybe there is something I can do. And in my soul, deep down, I always knew that something has to start with getting an education. And that's what really led the way for me because I wasn't allowed to go to a regular high school. And I found out about the Independent Learning Center. And that's when I started ordering the courses and studying at home.
And so tell us how that developed, because I think you were doing it stealthily and trying to get ahead.
I was allowed to or study at home again, not ideally, but I think my ex-husband and his parents thought, well, at least this way she'll kind of just stop at least bugging us about it. So I would order my courses, but then I was obviously expected to make sure that I always fulfill my duties as a mother and a daughter-in-law and as a wife. So I would do all the chores during the day, and then at night I would go into my room and I would take out my math books and my economics books and everything. I would study, and that would be my escape time. It would be that time under the bridge for me, where I would actually sit in my room at night and I would just get lost in my studies and trying to balance my economics and math equations. And it took me about 6 years or so to finish my high school credits. And I applied to university and I got in, but I was told that there's no useless money to waste on your silly little hobbies. I couldn't get OSAP, which is government funding, because they look at household income, and his income was above that threshold. And at that point, again, my dreams were crushed, because I was like, how am I going to go to school now? How am I going to go to university now? So that was that other next push for me, I think, was that realizing that if I wanted to go for a further education, I needed to find a way to make my own money and pay my own way. Kijiji was just starting out, so I started putting some ads online, and in a few months I was able to establish a home-based babysitting service. By then I also figured out how to get things done at home, and I knew that if I got my mother-in-law on board, everybody would be on board. So I involved her in the daycare so that she would be on board with it. And then I found other ways to make little inroads. Like I said to my mother-in-law that, if I got a driver's license, then we'd be able to go shopping and we'd be able to go buy things for the daycare kids, etc. So maybe we can learn how to drive together. And that's how I got my driver's license and my first car, my first cell phone, and just like these little wins were like propelling me in the right direction.
And it sounds like you were planning your escape.
I think I was, although I didn't really quite know at that time that that's consciously what I'm doing.
The car, the getaway,
yeah,
the education.
Most of my money every month would be taken away from me by my ex-husband, but I would still stash away a little bit on the side every month, like $50, $100, $200, whatever I could. So it took me another 3 years to, save up the $2,500 that I needed to pay for my first year tuition fee as a part-time student at the University of Toronto. I was 26 when I started, and my daughters at the time were 7 and 2, and I still remember that first day of class. I got there 15 minutes early, sat in the empty lecture hall, big goofy smile, tears streaming down my face, and just sitting there in disbelief that, wow, this is really happening. And that's when my world really started to shift, because when I was in university, on one hand, on campus, I was being treated with so much respect and admiration by my professors and my fellow students, because I was doing really well. And then I would go home and I would be treated with insults and humiliation and disrespect. And I thought to myself, like, what's going on? Maybe everybody who's been telling me that this is normal, maybe they're wrong. Maybe that voice inside my own head, which is telling me this is not normal, maybe that's the voice I should listen to. Because now suddenly I was being treated with respect for those very things that I was ridiculed all my life for. My intelligence and my ambitions and my goals and my dreams and my individuality. And that's what led me to start looking for support, and eventually stumbled upon the Health and Counseling Center at the University of Toronto. There was a sign outside that had a bunch of questions on it. Do you feel intimidated? Like you've lost your voice, like you can't speak up, like you're living in fear. And it was as if it was almost as if it was calling out to me that, come in and talk. So I went in and I made an appointment. And the first time I was sitting across from my counselor, the floodgates opened and I started asking, can you tell me what's wrong with me? What do I need to do to be a better wife? What is that secret to being a good wife that keeps eluding me? How do I keep everybody happy? Maybe if I cook better food or wash better clothes or keep the baby quieter at night or not talk too much or not have these ambitions and goals. And that's the first time anyone ever said to me, Samra, it's not your fault. No matter what you do not deserve to be treated this way. You do not deserve to be abused. And suddenly, everything that I had internalized for all those years, that this was my fault, I was wrong, there was something inherently flawed with me, I deserved this, because that's what I was told all the time. Suddenly, it had a name. it was abuse, and it was not okay, and it was not normal, and it was not my fault. It was, sadly, I'm not the only person this happened to or happens to. And I also learned about the generational cycle of abuse, that my daughters are growing up watching this and normalizing this. And this is probably likely going to happen to them too. And they're going to not know any better, just like I didn't, because I saw that in my childhood growing up. My father was abusive to my mom, and that's what I normalized in my marriage. And when I became conscious of that through counseling, I knew that I had to break that cycle, if not for myself, then for my girls.
So Samra, you were mentioning you've had that breakthrough moment when you realized that what you thought was internalized shame and guilt and you're a terrible mother in person and horrible, when in fact it was abuse. And you'd been gaslit all these years, and everything that you'd been told on the one hand in your family was totally contradicted by the way you're being perceived in the outside community. And that really gave you the courage to leave. And you're right, that courage isn't the absence of fear, that courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. And that is so wonderful. Tell us how you're able to do that, because we have resources available in Canada. We're a very lucky country. We're a very well-resourced country, and yet people still aren't able to make that leap. And so perhaps you could tell us what you did next and how that happened, because I think you actually were very proactive in the next steps.
Oh my God, that's such an amazing question. Because yes, we do have resources, we do have support, but I think the first person that we need support and permission from to do anything is ourselves. And oftentimes we think and feel and are made to believe it, with no fault of our own, that there is no way out. But when you see that light and you see that opening, then the choice is ours. Whether we're going to walk through that opening, not knowing what lies on the other side, because that's the fear. The biggest fear is the fear of the unknown. So that's the fear. Like, I don't know if I jump out of this plane, is my parachute going to open or not? I don't know if I go through this tunnel, is there going to be light at the end of the tunnel or not? Is it ever going to end or not, right? I didn't know any of that. In fact, I was very scared. I didn't have any kind of family support. I didn't have any money, any income. I was a full-time student, and I had very little friends, not even real friends really, because I wasn't allowed to make friends. But I had this thought in my mind, and my heart was that even if there is a tiny chance, like a 1% chance that I will make it, that my life could be better than what it is today, I want to take that chance. And that's where the courage comes in. Because when you do go against what you have been conditioned to believe, what you have been taught, when you go against the normal, whatever that normal has been for you, it is scary, because suddenly you're going to lose everybody that you have seeked approval from for all your life. You're going to lose the support that you know. You're going to lose the community that you know. You might be rejected. I was rejected by my family, my community. A lot of the people I considered friends completely shunned me when I walked away from my marriage, because no woman is ever supposed to do that. No woman from my entire family for generations had ever walked away from marriage. No matter what happened, you were supposed to stay, you were supposed to sacrifice, you were supposed to make it work. That is the job of a woman. And I walked away, and that meant I faced a lot of rejection and a lot of backlash. And that's where the choice comes in. Are you going to choose to really believe in what is right to you, what feels right to you? Or are you going to simply go with the flow, even though it doesn't feel right inside of you and inside your heart and soul? So I was able to find friends, professors, mentors who are my chosen family. And that's the family that I consider even today. But that courage has to come from within. And we all have it within us. The choice is whether we use it or not.
I always ask, you may not find it directly with your parents, but I would call maybe a guardian angel or some person or some idea or value, because it's like the shining light, the North Star that keeps you going. And what was it for you?
I think for me, growing up, it was a dream that I will one day graduate as a top student at a top university, and I will make a difference and I will help people. I'd always carried that dream, even during the first few years of my marriage when it was absolute darkness and I never had I didn't have any hope of ever being able to go to school, I would stand in front of a mirror and practice my graduation speech that I would one day give as a top student. And that happened when I graduated from University of Toronto, like 15 years later. And my daughters have been the biggest inspiring force in my life. They have been such a source of strength simply by existing and being in my life, that a lot of times, even though I've been afraid of making a choice for me, as soon as I think about I'm going to make this choice to give them a better life, it's a no-brainer.
What can we learn from this? What do you think we can teach our kids and also ourselves around what impacts we can have by what we're doing?
I think on that note, I have learned a lot from my kids. My daughter, when she was 14 or 15, my older one, she said to me, because I used to encourage and even push my kids to have a relationship with their father, because again, I'd grown up in a culture believing that parents can do no wrong, and no matter what, you've got to like have your parents in your life, etc. So I would encourage and push them. And also it came from a place of, I think, guilt that, I took my daughters away from a complete family, and my idea of complete family at that time was very culturally based. So my older daughter said to me several years ago that, Mom, if he wasn't my dad, if he, let's say he was just a random person, some acquaintance that we'd come across, someone that we just knew in the community, given who he is, a misogynist, a sexist, a racist, an abuser, a homophobic, would you really want someone like that in my life as a role model? And I said, no. And she said, so why does he get a free pass? He is not good for my emotional and mental health, so he doesn't deserve to be in my life. And it was a big aha moment for me. And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. And I'm not going to push you for it anymore. And I never did again. And both my daughters have decided to cut him out because, again, they prioritize their own mental and emotional well-being. And I'm very proud of them for that, and I support them. And if at any point in their lives they want him in their life in whatever capacity, that's their decision. That's not my decision. And I think that's what I would like to say to parents, is to role model boundaries and healthy behaviors and putting your mental health first, putting your emotional well-being first. There is no greater disservice to ourselves than diminishing our fire or fitting into certain boxes or sacrificing our needs and well-being to make others comfortable. And I think as parents, we need to role model that behavior for our children and encourage our children to be able to express themselves freely, to be able to do what feels right for them instead of controlling them to fit into our ideas of what normal should look like.
The courage to make the decision to cut off people that are toxic, those of us that have grown up in dysfunctional families with narcissistic parents, or where the disappointment is profound, and even to this day feel an obligation, we have to ask ourselves, and this is what I want to ask you to share with our audience, is how do you have the ability to have the judgment to say, this is not working, this is not good, and I can move on, and I'm not going to be guilted, and I'm going to make that right move? Because if that parent really cared about me, wouldn't they care about my well-being? If my husband really cared about me, wouldn't he care about my own happiness? And the same thing for your daughters. And most people are afraid. They may see it, but they can't make that leap. How can you help our audience understand what you did and how tough it is, and what we should be really prepared for?
It is very tough. It is very painful to walk away from people that you've always sought approval from. As children, we are wired, and it's a survival for us to get our parents to care for us and love us and approve of us. But when we grow up in dysfunctional families and abusive parents, and whether they're abusive to each other or to us. I think, even exposure to domestic abuse is abuse, child abuse. So because it really messes up your entire idea of what the world and what relationships look like. So it's really painful. It's not easy. And I have had and still continue to have many moments of self-doubt and guilt. And am I doing the right thing? And the trauma never really goes away. You never move on from trauma. You move on with it. You learn skills and you develop resources, and you just find things that work for you to manage your way through it. And there will always be those bad days, and there are days when I wake up with feeling like there's a spiky big bowling ball in my tummy and then that I feel that anxiety. A couple years ago, for example, I was moving from Mississauga to Toronto, and I was packing stuff, and I came across my passport. That was my very first passport after I got married. It was my Pakistani passport. My age was 17. My marital status was married. My occupation was housewife. And there was a picture of me in that passport that was taken when I was 16. And I looked like a replica of my daughter. And I could see my daughter in there because my daughter at that time was 16 or 17. And I just absolutely broke down. I think I cried for 3 hours sitting in my walk-in closet. It just that image, even though, it's nothing new to me. I've been sharing my story for years. I've written a book about it, but just something about seeing that picture and seeing my daughter in that picture just broke something in me. And moments like this will continue to happen. So it's not like you just, you're out of it and then it's over. It's about developing those skills that work for you. It's about, yes, I'm having a tough day today. It's okay if I sulk and cry in bed for a day and I'll get back up tomorrow. It's okay to take time off to myself. It's okay to go away for a few days to prioritize my mental health and well-being. And certainly it comes with mom guilt. I'm a single mom, so I want to be there for my children. But I also know that if I don't fill my own cup, I won't have anything to give them. I have to put on my own oxygen mask, as cliche as this sounds, right? And I think when it comes to boundaries with people and cutting people and toxic relationships out of your life, that again is a conscious decision. And I always use this analogy, that your life is like a tree, and you're the trunk, you're the core of your tree. That's your relationship with yourself. And if that's not strong, nothing else will work, because your relationship with yourself is the foundation for your relationship with everyone else in your life. And then all these branches are the different people in your life. And there will be some healthy, vibrant branches that will add beauty and nutrients and, and nurture your life, which you want to hang on to. Then there will be branches that will sort of dry and rot away and then sort of fall off and kind of disappear. And those are people that kind of walk in and out of your life. And sometimes, you move jobs and you lose touch with your colleagues, or you change a group of friends or whatnot. But then there will be branches that will rot and dry and become ugly and take away everything and all the nutrients and well-being from the other branches, but they will refuse to fall off. They will just stay on there like these toxic, draining your energy. And you got to go in with a giant pair of scissors and chop those things off yourself. Otherwise, the quality of your tree and your life is going to be compromised. And I think that is something that I have learned to do, as hard as it is, on a proactive basis. And I've cut my mother off from my life for that very reason. And, and for many years, I didn't talk to her. And now when I talk to her, it's very transactional, very superficial. Okay, what do you need? How can I help you? That's kind of it. And I've chosen to do that because in some way, I feel like I just want to help her in her old age. But I'm not going to give her the permission to make me feel bad about myself or my life choices. I'm not going to give her the permission to make me feel inferior, because no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And when you take that consent back and you take that power back from other people, that is what makes us unstoppable. And that comes with practice. It doesn't happen overnight, and there will always be guilt and shame and stigma associated with it. And Mother's Day for me is extremely hard, and I see all these posts on Facebook of how people are having wonderful relationships with their moms. And even as a mother myself, my kids have this wonderful relationship with me, but I don't have that with my mom. And yes, it's hard. But then at the same time, I also know that by role modeling the behavior of setting boundaries and prioritizing my mental and emotional well-being, I am that's what makes me a good parent and a good role model for others as well.
We're almost out of time, and I want to close on a positive note. I like your analogy of the tree. Everyone knows we need to prune trees, the bad branches, and we also have to allow the light to reach the good branches. Tell us about the good branches, the John Rothschilds, the other people in your life. How can we find those people so that we can grow? It's not enough just getting rid of toxicity. We have to be feeding ourselves with nourishing relationships.
It's really being courageous and proactive, reaching out. When I always trust the way I feel around people. And again, that's come with practice. It didn't happen right away, because what abuse really does is it makes you distrust your own intuition, because you've always been told you're feeling wrong, the way you feel is wrong, the way you act is wrong. So it takes a while to develop that trust with your own inner self. And now that I have kind of been practicing that, I always very consciously think about how I feel around certain people. I've met people through my volunteer work. I serve on the board of directors at the University of Toronto, and I've met people there who are I call all those people part of my personal cheerleading squad. And those are my chosen family. And I think you got to have that initiative. And sometimes we're afraid of putting ourselves out there and saying, hey, would you like to grab a cup of coffee? Can I have a chat with you? Because we're afraid people will say no. And yes, people will say no. A lot of people will say no. I've heard a lot of people say no, and I have had a lot of people ignore my LinkedIn messages or emails. But then I've also had a lot of people say yes, because they see something in you. They see something that, they want to nurture. And we all want to, at least most of us, want to give back and want to pay it forward. And when you meet someone that you feel connected to, reach out. And yes, it might hurt your pride a little bit if they don't respond, but you'll get over it. But I think the win that you can potentially gain from that is worth it, because ultimately, as human beings, we all want connections. And when we connect authentically with others, that raises our resilience. It raises our collective resilience as a society, and also our individual resilience, because it shows us that we're not alone.
So you're very much able to find those mentors. And that's something I guess you've been able to develop in the program that you're running for abused women.
Yes, and the program Brave Beginnings is absolutely based on that principle, that oftentimes when women leave abuse, they do feel very much alone. They might be alienated by their communities, their families, their societies, and at that time, human connection is so crucial. As important as getting your house in order, your finances in order, and everything is, having somebody in your corner who believes in you it helps you believe in yourself. And that's what all my mentors did for me. And I wanted to create a community of others paying that forward, and creating that community for other women who have taken that first courageous step to walk away from abuse. Because walking away is extremely hard. Staying away is harder.
So I'd like to end it with the last couple of lines in an article that was written in Toronto Life in the March 2017 issue, where you're lying in bed cuddling with your youngest daughter. And she says to you out of the blue, "Mom, I think Daddy's family picked you because you were only 16. They thought you were just going to do whatever they told you to do, and they'd be able to make you into whoever they wanted you to be." And then she paused and said, "Man, they picked the wrong girl."
Yes.
So what an honor it is to meet you today and have you educate us about mental health and life. And what I'm hearing, Samra, is that very often we think there's our lives and then there's mental health. But it really is one thing.
It's so interconnected. It's all one thing. And the way we feel impacts the way we live, and the way we live impacts the way we feel. And it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to put ourselves first. In fact, it's important, not just for ourselves, but everybody around us, to take care of ourselves and remove the shame and stigma from these conversations, because the more we connect with each other, the more resilient we are, the more collectively and individually resilient we will be, and the more we will be able to heal. And there's a lot of life and there's a lot of beauty after trauma and adversity. I'm living proof of that. And my mission in life is to help others make that a reality for themselves as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
That was Samra Zafar in conversation with Dr. Jack Muskat, Medcan's Clinical Director of Mental Health.
We'll post episode highlights and links and the full video of the conversation at eatmovethinkpodcast.com.
Eat Move Think is produced by Ghost Bureau. Senior producer is Russell Gragg. I'm associate producer Jasmine Rach.
Social media and strategy support is from Chantal Gertan and Andrew Imecs. I'm executive producer Christopher Shulgan.
Remember to rate and subscribe to Eat Move Think on your favorite podcast platform. Follow our host, Sean Francis, on Twitter and Instagram at Sean C. Francis, that's Sean with a U, and Medcan at Medcan Live Well.
We'll be back soon with a new episode examining the latest in health and wellness.
See ya.